Hey everyone, my name is James Lynch and this is the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, post them in the chat. I'll get to every single one of them I can. We got some NHL news to talk about. In about 30 minutes, we're going to be joined, or less than 30 minutes, we're going to be joined by my good buddy Troy Noak, who's going to be talking all things Columbus Blue Jackets. They've had an interesting offseason. They have a new GM. They made a major trade in the offseason. They have a new head coach. So we're going to get Troy's thoughts on all that in about 30 minutes. Sorry about the time today, guys. I had a dentist appointment, so I had to move this, and then Troy wasn't able to come on until 1 p.m. Eastern time, and then I have something directly after this. So how we're going to do this is for the first 30 minutes, I'm just going to talk about some news and answer your questions about everything that's going on in the world of hockey, and then Troy's going to join us in about 30 minutes. We'll do about around 30 minutes with him talking all things Columbus Blue Jackets. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate you watching the show. Again, any hockey-related questions, get them in the chat, and while you're there, make sure you hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Let's go look on the channel as we always do every single time on the Fanatics View channel. My guy Taylor always putting up good content. You can see here we've got some really interesting stuff here. Chris Tanev giving his Mount Rushmore of hockey stuff. We've got Robert Thomas interview. We've got some clips from some of the other shows we've been doing as well. Lots of off-season content. That's one of the great things about being on the Fanatics View channel. It's not just one team. We've got multiple teams on here. So if you guys are looking for any sort of hockey-related stuff, it could be your favorite team, could not be. This is the place to be. Go check it out. A lot of really good media availability from various teams throughout the league. And it's been a busy offseason. This has been one of the more memorable offseasons we've had in recent years. So make sure you're keeping tabs on everything that's going on in the world of hockey. Let's get to some NHL news as we usually do. Just going to do a quick cough here. Still dealing with some bronchitis here, guys. So yeah. Oh, the big trade we got to talk about from last week. Yaroslav Askarov. This was a interesting move, although kind of predictable after the Nashville Predators re-signed Pekka Rinne. So let's go have a quick look at that, what the exact trade was. Let's find out the actual trade on it, because I got to remember the exact details, as I spelled trade wrong, and I'm not even doing it right. Not a good start. Here we go. Here we go. Askarov traded to the Sharks by the Predators. Askarov's traded to the San Jose Sharks by the Nashville Predators on Friday and signed a 2-year, $4 million contract extension, $2 million annual value. The contract begins in the 25-26 season. Nashville acquired forward prospect David Edstrom, goalie prospect Magnus Chirona, and a conditional first-round pick in the 2025 draft, previously acquired by San Jose from the Vegas Golden Knights. Should the pick be a top 10, the Sharks will have the right to transfer either their own first-round pick in the 2025 draft or the Golden Knights selection. I like this move for the Sharks. They've got, franchise goaltender potentially. There was a school of thought that maybe Rinne was going to get traded out of Nashville and they were going to, have their long-term plans involve Askarov. So they opt to go the other way. They keep Pekka Rinne, who I thought played pretty well last season. He had a few blips in the playoffs. There was a couple goals in that series with the Canucks where Rinne, I thought, didn't play his best. But this is a good move by the Sharks. Of course, they have him. They have Mackenzie Blackwood. I do wonder if Blackwood now might be on the trading block, just because, again, you're going to have two pretty solid guys. I don't know if Blackwood wants to sign up for being a backup. I think the idea when he got traded from the Devils or went from the Devils to the Sharks was that he would be a starter. So that's something to keep in mind. I think there's going to be a lot of goalie changes come the regular season. I know there's a few teams, Detroit being one of them, that already has a crowded crease when it comes to too many goalies. So that's sort of something that should be kept in mind as well. But I like this move here for the Sharks. Again, the Sharks are still in somewhat of a rebuilding mode. They have made some moves, though, getting Tyler Toffoli. Let's go look at the offseason moves they've done so far. I do always bring up this article from The Athletic, which is very notable. Let me just find the offseason moves that he did. I know Toffoli's one off the top of my head. Let's go look at some of the other ones. So they added a few actually. So they've added now, the Sharks have added Tyler Toffoli, Alex Wenberg, Barclay Goudreau, which was that kind of shrewd move by the Rangers. Hey, Barclay Goudreau, do you want to trade to San Jose? No, I don't want to go there. Okay, we're going to put you on waivers, and San Jose is going to claim you. How about that? And Jake Wallman. So they've been making some good moves here. This is obviously still not a playoff team, but this is a step in the right direction for a team that is, very much on the come up in terms of prospects and everything they have going on. And like I said, I think they've got a really good goalie here in Askarov. That I'm pretty excited about. And for Nashville, they're just loading up on prospects. I like the return here that they got as well, the first round pick. I think this is a win-win for both teams here with the trade. So that was one of the big moves that happened last week. We also had, you're mentioning Cody Ceci. Yeah, that was a trade too. I think we talked about that last week, did we not? With Avery, the whole Cody Ceci trade going to San Jose as well. Oh yeah, sorry, you're mentioning because he went to the Sharks as well. That's true. So yes, they have Cody Ceci as well, who logged on some pretty big minutes with San Jose last year as well. So yeah, that's again, Sharks are going to be an interesting team. Again, I still don't think we're talking playoffs, but we are talking about some interesting things that are going on in the league right now. Let's look at some other news that's going on. I just saw something here that kind of piqued my interest before we hopped on here. Oilers reportedly pursuing a massive trade to shake things up by the hockey writers. Let's have a look. The Oilers have options. They are looking at other things. Like, I don't know what type of trades they would have. Oh, we got Troy on here a little bit early, guys. This is great. So forget about this news about the Oilers reportedly shake things up. Maybe we can talk about that with Troy. But let me get the screen off here and let me swiftly put this on with our guy, Troy Noak, joining us the show here to talk all things Columbus Blue Jackets. Troy, how's it going, man?
It's great, James. Thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure for having me on the show. I've been watching your content for a really long time. I've enjoyed it for years in the MMA space and now in the NHL space. And I'm glad to break down this offseason with you here today.
Yeah, it was a no-brainer. I really wanted someone to come on here and talk Blue Jackets. There's nobody who knows the team better than you as far as people that I know. And yeah, really, really excited to get into it. I think the first thing we should start with is just kind of some of their off-season acquisitions. I got the page up here. Might as well go into that right now, and then we can talk a little bit about the Patrick Laine trade. But just before they did the Patrick Laine trade, we've got, let me just see if this is going to work. Yeah, there we go. So you look at some of the additions, and this isn't counting, obviously, the trade they made with Laine, but they add Sean Monahan, they add Jack Johnson. And obviously some familiarity with Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau, so we'll see if there's some magic there. I like the pickup of Jack Johnson, a veteran there who's been in the league for a while. We'll add that locker room presence. Your thoughts just so far, and we can add the Laine trade in there too, and we can talk about that after, but just your overall thoughts on the offseason for the Blue Jackets so far. I've been pretty impressed.
So right from the get-go, it depends how you perceive this team. Me, I'm a fan of this team. I'm happy with what Don Waddell's doing here because specifically this team's had a logjam of players, especially at defense and wing, that they had to get rid of for a long time to open up spots for these young guys to really take a step and get consistent ice time. So defense last year, Bean, Boquist, Peak. Those are three guys that they were from the last regime of Jarmo Kekalainen that Don Waddell either traded away or chose not to re-sign. And then at wing, Alexander Nylander, Alex Texier. These are guys that I would say they have middle six potential for most teams, but with the way that the Blue Jackets are stacking up with how their prospects are developing slowly, those guys aren't going to get the consistent top line minutes that they got with all the injuries last year. Hence why Alexander Nylander didn't get his qualifying offer to come back to the team. So, and that also coincides with the Patrick Laine trade and how I perceive this from the Columbus Blue Jackets side of things. It's clear that cap flexibility can be weaponized and is huge in today's NHL with the hard cap limit. And Patrick Laine was also contributing to that logjam of wingers that we had, not allowing the young guys to develop and get proper ice time. And I think for what it's worth, getting $8.7 million a year off the books and having a shade under $16 million in cap space available right now, it leaves us with a ton of options. And realistically, they're probably not going to be contending for the playoffs this year. And they could use a ton of that space to recoup assets that they used to get rid of Patrick Laine, like that second round pick, by taking on a contract or two at the deadline or even before the season starts. So we'll see what Don Waddell's going to do. And I really like what he's done so far in terms of giving us flexibility.
Lot of good points there. And it was funny because I know you were in the chat last week and it might have even been Joe who's in the chat right now. And by the way, shout out to Joe, who's a regular here on the show, contributing. But I can't remember if it was him or someone else said that, the Blue Jackets, they're I don't like any of the moves they've done or something. I forget what it was. It was something along the lines of like, I wasn't that impressed, but you just mentioned it there, the cap space. I've said this time and time again, and I know you agree with me here. Cap space is one of the most valuable assets you can have in the league because there's going to be teams that are cap crunched and they're going to need to make moves. And sometimes those moves end up really benefiting one team, whether it's something lopsided or just like a cap, move. I mean, we've seen so many players when it comes to moving out cap space. Like, didn't the Leafs a couple of years ago, I remember they traded Patrick Marleau for like a first round pick or something just to get the cap hit off the books. So that could be something that is really added in. You mentioned Don Waddell. Were you happy with him being in as the GM? Didn't have a lot of success in Atlanta if you go look back at some of the moves. And of course, I'm dating myself because we're talking about the 90s, but a lot of good moves in Carolina. Really has structured that team quite well. I know Tulski was a big part of that too, but he really at the end of the day was the one who took the reins from Jim Rutherford after he left the organization. What do you make of Waddell coming in and some of the moves he's made so far?
So essentially, my perception of Don Waddell before coming to the Columbus Blue Jackets organization is this guy not only being on top of actual hockey operations, he was in charge of business in Carolina. So he had a lot more to do than most general managers do in the first place. And also, there's reports, and it's more or less confirmed, that the ownership side from Carolina, like they like to save money. You know what I'm saying. I don't want to use the word stingy because obviously the guy's a multimillionaire and owns.
No, they are. I mean, there was. I don't think that's been widely publicized. I mean, there was issues. There was talk that maybe Rod Brind'Amour was going to leave because he wasn't getting paid the amount he wanted, right? So that's been fairly consistent publicly, I would say.
So with that being said, I would like to say that Don Waddell, basically from my time building Carolina up from a team that I always used to see the New York Islanders play locally and beat up on as a kid, to what they are now in the past few years is pretty impressive. Considering on the ownership side of things, it didn't seem like he had total control of what was going on behind the scenes and a lot of the moves that were being made. And we know with the Columbus Blue Jackets organization, the ownership really trusts the guys they hire to do what they want and not get their hands in a lot of the business. And I think Don Waddell, with the full reins to do whatever he wants with this organization because of the ownership and the team he's assembling around him, I think that it's reasonable to expect that similar success will happen here, to which is what happened in Carolina, if not more, because of the ownership difference.
And I think, you mentioned the Laine trade. And by the way, before we get into anything else, I totally messed up the top of the show. I said Pekka Rinne instead of UC Saros. I don't know how I mixed that up. I know Pekka Rinne's retired. You're absolutely fair to be mentioning this, Wesley. I don't know how I screwed that up. I don't know why I get them mixed up every now and then. But yes, UC Saros is the goalie right now for the Predators, not Pekka Rinne. Pekka Rinne's been there forever. So maybe that's why I got confused. But thank you for catching that. But what I was going to say about Waddell is I also like the fact that he took care of this Laine thing before the season started. It could have been a real distraction. We know that Laine's wanted out for a while, and he's had some issues with the coaches, and they have a new coach in Dean Evison, which I really like that hire, coming over from Minnesota previously. And previously, we know him here well in Vancouver. He used to coach the Vancouver Giants, the junior hockey team. But he's sort of a hard-nosed guy, and I do wonder if that was going to be a conflict with Laine, going forward, maybe not, having the friendliest reception from a guy that's sort of hard-nosed. So I think trading Laine is good. I like Evison going to bring some structure in there that they, maybe you can tell me, hasn't really had that since maybe John Tortorella, in terms of like, this is what I expect, this is what I want. Nothing against Pascal Vincent, and obviously the Babcock thing was a bit of a disaster too, but I like the way, it seems like there's a lot of structure in the organization right now, from Waddell down to Dean Evison. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. But before I get into them, I want to preface this by saying one thing. Pascal Vincent, he's a great communicator. He's a really nice guy, but he was just thrust into a very unfortunate situation, because the truth of the matter is, although he had a lot of success in the QMJHL and the AHL levels as an assistant and a head coach, he's never run an NHL training camp before. So to expect him to change from being the assistant coach, who's the cool guy that's hanging around the players and relaying some information that the head coach wouldn't necessarily get, to then becoming the guy disciplining these players, benching them, and telling them the reasons why they're not playing in certain positions that they think they deserve. It could... Listen, I don't know what these players are thinking, but it could be perceived as disingenuous when you have such a big change from being relaxed, calm, cool, and now you have to start disciplining these guys in a completely different way. So I just want to say he was put into a horrible situation. So I sympathize with him a lot, and I really do wish he does well in the AHL with the
Laval Rocket. Yeah.
The Laval Rocket.
Yeah. Yeah. I only remember that because I think Alex Burrows or someone was the head coach of the Rocket and kind of abruptly left, and then he got in. So that was kind of big news here, is what I remember. So,
and of course, he's a French speaker. You saw he hit it off with the media in Montreal every time he went back there. It was probably going to be coming. So with the accountability that this team has more or less been lacking in the discipline, and the structure and consistency are the two key terms, structure and consistency, because a lot of people, unless you're a diehard Blue Jackets fan, you don't see too many games on ESPN Plus around here. And a lot of things that people forget are, this team in the first period is dynamite. And I know that sounds absolutely insane when you're looking at their record, but they had I think it was an 11-game losing streak in the beginning of the season, and 8 or 9 of those wins, they were leading. So clearly in the third period, it's been a consistent theme that they don't prioritize creating chances and getting offense late into the game. They end up making bad clearances, getting trapped, tired, and ending up in horrible situations. And the other thing is over 20 of the goals they conceded last season, they either pulled their goalie to try to score in an empty net or the other team did. So at face value, I know their counting stats are just horrific. And that's the truth of the matter because there was no consistency. The lines were being juggled, the coaching situation. And on top of that, there was a ton of injuries. Zach Werenski, he said he played 70 games, so he missed 12 full games. And the 2 games that he got injured, and he also missed those games. So let's say he missed 14 games. Johnny Gaudreau missed a game. There was one player on the team that played all 82 games, and that's Ivan Provorov. Patrick Laine missed over 60 games. Kent Johnson missed the back end of the season. I mean, this team, we got to see every flash of a prospect in the AHL that we had to assess whether we want to trade them or not, because so many people got injured last year. And I think the hires of Mike Hovland from the Cleveland Monsters and Scott Ford from the Milwaukee Admirals, those guys, specifically Mike Hovland, he's worked with a lot of these guys in the AHL. And also Nicholas Backstrom, he was a goaltending special advisor for the team, has now moved to be the actual goaltending coach for the team.
Oh, I didn't know that. Former Minnesota Wild goaltender back in the day, and has the same name as the Washington Capitals player.
Yes, and I think that's going to be really good, especially because I think Daniil Tarasov, he's a sneaky, amazing goaltender because in the beginning of the season, he was recovering from a really big injury. And basically from February on, he was one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. But yet again, it's by average, not counting stats. So if you don't take a deeper look into the stats, you're like, oh, this guy just has average stats for a goaltender. But if you take into consideration he was rehabbing an injury the first few months of the season, his stats towards the end of the season were incredible. And this is a 6'5" Russian guy that the team, quite frankly, loves playing for because he's very quiet. He's about his business. And quite frankly, the complete opposite of Elvis Merzlikins. And he's a player that Don Waddell has openly said, this is a reclamation project. No one wants to onboard his contract. And Jonas Korpisalo got taken on to the Boston Bruins last year at about $3 million a year. So, and he was more or less one of the worst goaltenders in the NHL. So if we get any sign of life from Elvis Merzlikins and there's an opportunity to flip him with salary retained, I think Don Waddell is just going to pounce at that opportunity, first offer he gets, and do it because Jet Greaves coming up from the AHL and Sergei Ivanov, who's on one of the worst teams in the KHL and consistently putting up 40, 50, 60 save win games. But he's 5'10". He seems to be the next UC Saros, but he's one of the best goaltending prospects out in Russia now. So one of the next big things on the to-do list for Don Waddell would be get Elvis Merzlikins back into form to either keep him or move him.
Yeah, $5.4 million on the books, slightly above Thatcher Demko, who there's a lot of talk about Thatcher Demko right now in Vancouver. Is he going to be able to start the season? Maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But let's get to some questions here, Anthony, and a lot of other people have been waiting patiently. Let's get to these. What will the line combos be? I know if you go to Daily Faceoff, they have an idea. Let's look there first, and then I want to see if you agree with what some of the line combos they have. Daily Faceoff, again, a site that we reference here a lot on the show, and they do a very, very, very good job of this. So right now they've got Gaudreau, Monahan, and Krill, Marchenko on the first line. Do you think this kind of looks like what we're seeing here? Why do they have Kent Johnson as a forward?
Okay, so more or less, I actually, when I prepared for this, I wrote notes of my projected lines as well.
Yeah,
so
no worries. This is why, look at this guy coming prepared. I love it.
So I think the top line is more or less what you're going to get. Obviously, the reason why they got Sean Monahan, whose contract expiration matches with Johnny Gaudreau 5 years and 5 years, is to put them together. And Sean Monahan specifically, one of his most valuable assets is that he plays the bumper slot on the power play. And this is a position that the Blue Jackets have had zero success with over the years. So when you don't have that look from down low to shoot from the slot, it gets a little bit predictable. And we tried to put Marchenko there. It didn't work. We've tried to put Laine there. It didn't work. It quite frankly just didn't work. So now bring Sean Monahan, who actually had the same amount of even strength points as Kyle Connor, Marty Necas, and Steven Stamkos last year. I think it's fair to say that he's a good even strength producer. And on top of that, 20th best faceoff guy in the league who can also play the power play and PK and bring, like I said before, stability and consistency to this team. The second line, I think it's highly probable that Boone Jenner plays the second line right.
I was wondering that too, because he's still the captain, isn't he?
He's still the captain. I'm wearing his jersey right here.
Oh, nice.
He's 20-plus minutes a night, penalty kill, power play. He's the net front guy down low. And I think ultimately having a guy with his leadership skills, and I saw Adam Fantilli interview recently that he really loves how Budenjenner is about his business and is a consummate professional. I think him being on a line with those two young guys, being the hard worker, winning the board battles, taking more of the physical toll of the NHL full season off of these 20 and 21-year-old players, I think that would be a good match. And then the third line, Dmitry Voronkov and Igor Chinakhov. I've seen highlights from these Russian media day games and these training games where they've been on the same line, just absolutely lighting it up. And Dmitry Voronkov is a guy who a lot of people aren't familiar with if you don't watch the Columbus Blue Jackets or if he didn't beat up your favorite player on your favorite team this year. Yeah. This is the 6'5" Russian that plays left wing and center, and he is tough as nails. In his first game of the NHL, in his second shift, he fought Arbor Xhekaj and just didn't even back down.
Nice.
He knew it was coming. This guy played on the top line in the playoffs in the KHL with Alexander Radulov and had a point every other game and is extremely consistent. This guy, he's honestly a mix between like a Philip Deneau and an Ivan Barbashev / like Lawson Krause in the sense that he does some dirty work. He's in front of the net. He's a big boy. And obviously you don't expect him to score 50+ points a season, but the intimidation factor, the size and the consistency, this is a guy that's going to make waves throughout the league this year. And Cole Sillinger, he's developing to be a second and third line center, honestly, and I have no problem with him being a third line center because what he did last year, he played physical. He didn't seem to back down. He had no problem fighting Nazem Kadri and other players, and I think there's no problem with a guy that can kill penalties, play hard and consistent, which is the prototypical players you want to be playing for Dean Evison, I would say.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's interesting. I still don't know why Kent Johnson's here. And then on the back end, we've got obviously Werenski, Servicen. That's a good first line. I didn't realize Werenski was making so much. I was looking at his cap hit here. He's 9.5. That's one of the highest. That's like Darnell Nurse money. And then we've got Servicen. I've always liked that pickup for them. Provorov's great. Jurasek, and then Harris, who they acquired in the Patrick Laine trade, and Gabranson, who unfortunately, I mean, listen, we had Gabranson in Vancouver, so I'm very familiar with what he's capable of. When they signed him to that contract, and that was obviously a previous regime signing there for $4 million. I don't know about that. I know, like, obviously he brings some veteran experience, but I mean, he's playing third line minutes and he's getting $4 million a season. That's a little too much for my liking. What do you make of the defensive pairings, and does this look like what we're going to see this season?
So, I think, honestly, David Jiricek is going to be playing top line at even strength with Zach Werenski and on the second power play. Because at the AHL, he was more or less averaging a point per game. And in the playoffs, this guy was an absolute spark plug for this team. He's a 6'3" / 6'4" right-handed shot from Czech Republic. And I've just been waiting for him. I've seen him in the World Juniors scoring game-winning goals, diving, belly flopping into the bench. This guy is awesome. I cannot wait to see what player he turns into. On the second line, I have Provorov and Severson. And the third line, I have Jordan Harris and Goodbranson, just like this. And one thing, I do want to come to the defense for Zach Werenski, although he hasn't stayed healthy recently. And I'm a big fantasy hockey guy, so this is also going to be dovetailed into a fantasy hockey take. But so defensemen in the NHL that have played at least 1,000 minutes, Zach Werenski is the fourth highest rate shooter, shots per game in the NHL for active D-men. So
interesting.
This guy is not afraid to shoot the puck, and you gamblers out there, you don't see too many D-men with a 3.5 SOG shot line, and he is one of them because this guy's not afraid to shoot. He gets consistently 25+ minutes a night, and in the offseason, he played in the IAHF championship for Team USA, quarterbacking the top power play, which was him at the point, Johnny Gaudreau on the left, Cole Caulfield at the bumper, Brady Tkachuk down low, and in the right face-off circle was Matt Boldy. And Matt Boldy unlocked Johnny Gaudreau and Zach Werenski, and you saw what an optimal power play would look like if there was a consistent left-handed shot in the right face-off circle, because that's something they did not have last year, and that is why I have been calling for players like Igor Chinakhov and Adam Fantilli to be gifted that power play spot because of their left-handed shot ability. And seeing Matt Boldy be in that position, I think Adam Fantilli will slot in perfectly to the power play one in that spot.
Interesting. Okay, so that'll make sense. Now, I don't keep bringing him up only because he's a BC guy, but where does Kent Johnson fit into all this? They did, I see, re-sign him. He's now coming in at an AAV of where we have it here. Where am I looking at here? Johnson. He's coming in at 1.8. What do you think of like that deal and his potential coming in here as well?
So Kent Johnson destroyed his shoulder and couldn't finish the season last year. So that was not good for improving what his potential deal could be for this year. So obviously from his side and the team side, they both want to prove a little bit more to get paid more, obviously. But we've seen the glimpses of skill. We've seen him score a Michigan goal versus the New York Islanders, who at the time that this goal was scored 2 years ago, that they were a better defensive team than they are now. And obviously, the majority of players do have sophomore slumps because teams adjust. They focus on players more. And on top of that, he got injured. So obviously his counting stats were atrocious. He played 42 games, had 6 goals and 10 assists. But you have to take into consideration he was barely playing like 15 or 16 minutes a night and given the proper deployment up and down from the AHL, XYZ. And I think this guy has a similar skill set to Johnny Gaudreau in the sense that they're both creative on the puck. They like entering the zone with the puck on their stick. They're primarily playmakers. They're not too physical in the corners. You're not expecting these guys to drop down block shots and put people's head through the glass, of course. And I think if he gets put with the right line mates, because I'm a big proponent of having a playmaker, a sniper, and a grinder on one line or a two-way forward. I think Kent Johnson being the playmaker, Adam Fantilli being the sniper, and Boone Jenner being the two-way forward to bring the line together and be balanced. I think that would be a fantastic line combination for those three. And I think if Kent Johnson gets the physical workload taken off him playing with a Boone Jenner or a Voronkov, I think it'll just unlock his point potential even more, because I think if he stays healthy and has a guy like that on his line, I think it's pretty reasonable to expect he's going to have at least 50 points this year.
Yeah, a lot of big things ahead. And again, second mistake of the show. I don't know why I thought Ken Johnson was a defenseman. I don't know why I thought that, but yes, it makes sense why he's listed here as the forward. That's why I was like, why is he put here? But it makes sense. And I see the question mark or the thing there, I think is because, is he not dealing with some injuries, or is he, I'm just wondering why they have this listed as a...
yeah, he's recovering from shoulder surgery.
Like you just mentioned, yeah. Okay.
Offseason. So he's on track to be ready for preseason and training XYZ, but obviously it's not official until he gets into the team's hands and under full supervision and training and whatnot.
There we go. Joe mentions, I don't want to hate on the guy's team, so he was sort of admitting he was the guy that wasn't a huge fan of that. I like seeing Johnny fall flat. I want to see Columbus do well. I think the Gaudreau thing is partially that, again, he's been through a couple coaches. There hasn't been, like we talked about at the top of the show, a lot of structure. I think now is the time that if you really want to see what Gaudreau's made of and what he can do, and now he has a supporting cast of a guy in Sean Monahan who used to play with him in Calgary, I think this is it. I mean, if he doesn't perform under this, then I don't think there's any hope. Do you sort of fall under this line of thinking as well, or are you a bit more optimistic?
Well, obviously I'm a Blue Jackets fan, so I am going to be more optimistic. But, and I want to say this respectfully, the last few years that Johnny Gaudreau has been on the Columbus Blue Jackets, with all due respect, his line mates have been the lowest skill line mates that he's ever had. Okay? Mm-hmm. And we can all accept that. We all know that. I'm a Blue Jackets fan. We have to be real here. Mm-hmm. So, and this is why I'm putting a solid amount of faith in the Blue Jackets to improve. I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs or anything, and I also expect Johnny Gaudreau to have a way better season. I'm drawing this comparison back to the IIHF championship and seeing what the power play looks like with a left-handed shot with basically half the team on the power play already. Johnny Gaudreau with Sean Monahan, who's a great decision maker and face-off winner, and we've seen consistently he plays good for coaches that coach hard. Daryl Sutter, he had his best season ever. So Dean Evason's most likely going to bring the best out of him because he's a leader on this team. That when he's matched with the structure, consistency, and potential breakout of all of these young guns like Adam Fantilli and Kirill Marchenko to round it out together. Kirill Marchenko's had 20 plus goals in his 2 first seasons in the NHL very quietly, and not a lot of people speak about that. And I don't know if you're familiar with Byron Bader and his prospect work and his statistical models. I love them. Free plug for his work. But okay, according to his stats, there has not been a player in the last decade that has had identical counting stats to Kirill Marchenko in his first NHL 100 games and not become a star. with his shooting rate, time on ice, and goals scored, and obviously factoring his success in the KHL before he came over. This is more or less, dare I say, a home run prospect that's about to pop off. And I live on Long Island, so when the Blue Jackets are playing the Islanders, Rangers, or Devils, I can't watch it on ESPN Plus with their commentary. I hear all the local commentary, and all they bring up every time they play the Blue Jackets is, these Russians are insane. How is this team this bad? This is the best, worst team I've ever seen in my life, which is hilarious because it's true.
Okay.
And I think the breakout potential for a Kirill Marchenko and an Adam Fantilli, Kirill Marchenko had 42 points last year, not being deployed properly, and Adam Fantilli was on pace for 50 points if he didn't get his calf sliced in half when he was playing in the middle of the season with a skate blade. So if you inject a couple 50-point scorers here and not having the second worst power play in the NHL in terms of goals scored, the only worst team of scoring goals in the power play in the NHL was the Philadelphia Flyers. That was the only team worse than the Columbus Blue Jackets. So
interesting.
If they have any reasonable improvement on the power play, I think Johnny Gaudreau could be a point per game player because he had 60 points this year and he was playing with AHL players, Alexander Nylander, you name it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Definitely something to sort of keep an eye on there. We already talked about the lines for Columbus. Columbus reminds me of the Oilers in 2013. I'm trying to remember who was on that Oilers team in 2013. Was Taylor Hall still on that team, or had he been gone since then? I'd have to go. You know what? We'll do a quick hockey DB on the Oilers from 2013. Edmonton Oilers. Let's go have a quick look. I love this site, by the way, if you ever need to kill some time. HockeyDB is where it's at. Edmonton Oilers. Okay, here we go. Let me just find this quickly. Obviously not as swift as I thought I would be. Why am I not? Oh, here we go. 2013. So I'm guessing we'll go 2012, 2013. Let's look at it there. Yeah, Taylor Hall was on that team. Sam Gagner, Jordan Eberle, Nail Yakupov. Jeez. Hemsky was on that team. Nugent Hopkins. I mean, it's pretty crazy how many players are still like in the league that were on this team. 11 years later. Darcy Hordachuk was on that team. I guess I could kind of see it. Like you have some up and comers, and there's some promise. This was before obviously McDavid came into the league. Ben Eager was on that team, former Blackhawk. I remember that. Yeah, and who are their goalies? Devin Dubnyk and Nikolai Habibulin. Wow. I don't know. I don't know if there's. I mean, you know better than me. You're the Oilers fan, so I'll Joe. That is. So I'll take your word for it. What else do we have? Which team do you think could surprise next season? You know what's funny? I've been watching a few things. I mean, obviously, I watch hockey content almost every day, and I've seen a few people, and I always kind of feel like this has always been the narrative, anyways, and it always annoys me. I see a lot of people saying Pittsburgh, man, keep an eye out. Sidney Crosby, like. Maybe, but like I haven't really been impressed with what Kyle Dubas has done. Even in this offseason, like I don't even know what moves I even have to go look what moves they made, but I've heard some people mention Pittsburgh is going to surprise, but to me this just looks like they got what? Anthony Beauvillier, Kevin Hayes, and Matt Grzelcyk in the offseason. That's not, I mean, this still looks like a team that's not going to make the playoffs. I think the team we're talking about right now, Columbus, could be a bit of a surprise. Like some of the stuff you're saying here, it does make sense. They've got a new coach. They have some pieces there. I think they made some good moves. I think in the case of trading Laine, I mean, we've seen plenty of times when a star player has been traded to a different team and it actually works out better for the team, whether it's a chemistry thing or locker room thing. I think the same could apply here. So, I mean, Columbus off the top of my head is one. Is there another team out there you think could surprise that maybe we're not expecting? Like, I'll give you another example. I think everyone assumes the Devils will make the playoffs this year. They were injury riddled last year. I think Sheldon Keefe's a good coach. They got a goalie now. That's one that'll make it. Like, that's an obvious choice of the Devils. But is there anyone else kind of in the league right now that you think could make some leaps this season?
I honestly think the Utah Hockey Club, I think the addition of Sergachev is gigantic for them.
Yeah.
I think what they've done on the back end for that team, which I think was the biggest problem for them, their forward group is absolutely insane. Clayton Keller, Lawson Krause, Dylan Gunther. I mean, there's guys on that team that can absolutely shoot the puck, but I mean, their defense was Swiss cheese last year, and now you're adding a premium defenseman in Mikhail Sergachev, and they honestly, and Connor Ingram, who's one of the most underrated goalies in the league and one of the funniest Twitter accounts in the NHL, like, I think the Utah Hockey Club, honestly, is a really good shout to either just miss the playoffs or sneak in with a wild card spot, because there's a lot of teams in that division that they're in that I don't really trust to either repeat or get better.
Let's look at their lines real quick, because I'm actually forgetting. First line, Clayton Keller, Hayton, and Schmaltz. You got Cooley on the second line with Dylan Gunther, who will always haunt me because that was the pick the Canucks were supposed to have, and then that was in the OEL trade. You got Bustad on the third line, and you've got Alex Carefoot on the fourth line, and then you're right, the defenseman. The move I like was John Marino. I was so mad that Canucks couldn't figure out a way to get him because I think he'd be a perfect fit there. I like that move. Jersey's a good pickup too. Ian Cole, who we saw in Vancouver last year, has that veteran experience, minus the Oilers series. He was good all season. And then in terms of net, you mentioned Ingram and Karl Vejmelka.
Kirill Vejmelka, that's a Czech tough
Kirill.
one. Luckily, my family's Czech, so I got you.
Okay, well, you're picking up all my mistakes today, so it's perfect. But yeah, I don't know much about him, but Ingram I know was solid, and Ingram was one of those guys I remember that just kind of came out of nowhere, like was kind of late bloomer type thing. But I had him in my fantasy pool last year. He actually did quite well for me. So yeah, you know what, Utah is definitely one that is worth keeping tabs on. Did I tell you? I don't know if you saw my live stream this week. Did I tell you I'm going to see a game in Utah in December? The Canucks are playing there, their first game of the season in Utah. So I'm going to that. I'm flying from here to Utah to go see the game, and then the Knights play the Canucks the next night. So I'm going to fly to Vegas and see the Canucks play there too, like kind of like a double header. So should be good.
Incredible. You have to let me know how that stadium is. And
I am. Yeah, no, I'm excited. So it should be good. And, tickets were actually kind of pricey, but I ended up getting... Here's a little tip for all of you out there, as far as someone who's seen a lot of hockey games in my time. It's better to not be... If you want like a decently priced ticket, just try and get center, even if it's upper bowl, because at least you can see everything. If you're lower bowl or like a little bit lower, sometimes it's harder to see all those positions. I prefer to be in the center, even if it means you're going to be a little bit higher. So I ended up getting like $200 tickets, and I'm going to be up right in the center to see sort of all the action. So I'm looking forward to it. Why can't they pick a name? Why can't they just go with the Yetis? Like what's the hold up here?
Everyone knows that's everyone's favorite name.
Yeah. You can make a cool logo. I like the color scheme though. Like that's unique, right? The blue and the black, almost a little bit old school San Jose Sharks. I know at one point the Sharks, I think, had a similar color scheme. But the baby blue and the black, I think really it looks sharp, and I'm curious to see how that will look on the jerseys this year. But yeah, Utah, a team to watch for sure. So we kind of answered that. I think Columbus's defense is way better than their offense. Boone Jenner are a dime a dozen. Columbus needs to get way better on the offense. Do you agree or disagree with that assessment?
Well, I would actually disagree. I would say that their defense needs massive improvement because I don't want to misquote myself, but if you check the NHL stats edge page, I believe the Blue Jackets are the third or fourth fastest team in the NHL. And in terms of creating chances at 5-on-5, they're the 14th best. And in my opinion, creating chances at even strength is more indicative of how good of a team you are. Because there's certain teams that directly rely on their power play and have a lot more success because of that. And we see when teams like that get into the playoffs, their goals dry up and they cannot do anything. And we've seen that team last year, as a diehard Columbus Blue Jackets fan, we've seen last year, the Blue Jackets beat the Colorado Avalanche, the New York Rangers, the Vegas Golden Knights, and the Vancouver Canucks. And do you know why that is? Because they tried to play fast with them. We lose to teams like the Islanders and the Kings because they play heavy and slow and wear down our young players that are not man-sized, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, you're literally describing what Canucks couldn't beat the Kings last year to save their life. It was the weirdest thing. They couldn't get past it, and for exactly what you're describing, because Canucks were a pretty big physical team, and for whatever reason they couldn't get past it. It was the weirdest thing. Like you could beat Carolina and some of these really top teams, but you can't beat LA, who had Cam Talbot in net last year. Like, come on. So
exactly, and that's my thing that I'm gonna connect back to the point I made earlier, that a lot of the games that the Blue Jackets lost, they just, in soccer terms, they just parked the bus and they did not try to score. And their clearances were horrible. They either iced the puck too many times, couldn't get it off the side, slow it down. And that's where a lot of their goals came from. And honestly, like when they're firing, they're absolutely incredible. But whether it be coaching, and also we have to acknowledge these are humans too. So when in the beginning of the season, when you go on an 11-game losing streak and 8 or 9 of your games are lost from a winning position, you develop here we go again mentality because it's happened to you so many times. And you also subconsciously know the season's basically over by Thanksgiving. So that wears on these players, and that's a hard habit to break out of when you have the same coach. Players are getting injured like crazy. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I think that's one thing that you can expect to change with Dean Evison coming in with a over a 60% win percentage as a head coach in the NHL, may I add. And you as a Vancouver Canucks fan know very well how much a good coach and systems play into improving massively, because this past season, I don't really think many people were giving Vancouver Canucks even the chance to even sniff making the playoffs, let alone be one of the best teams in their division.
Yeah. Well, a couple things about the Canucks season last season, and that's why I'm kind of curious to see how this season goes. Jim Rutherford, and you can see the quote from last year. He says everything has to go right if we're just going to make the playoffs. That was the president of hockey operations mandate to the season, and they did play really well, and they obviously did quite good. Now, some of those numbers were inflated. If you go look at the PDO numbers, it was like historic. Some of the like the sort of, and for people that know PDO, it's basically like the amount of like normal, like decent scoring chances. Like it was basically like they were getting goals that were not typical of the type of goals. They were getting a lot of puck luck, I guess was the best way to put it.
Yeah, it's like your expected goal differential subtracted from the expected save differential.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's like a luck stat.
But I think the Canucks showed that, like, yeah, you have a good coach, you have a couple pieces that might fit together. Like they did a really good job last offseason of picking up like little players that kind of like fit certain roles better than other guys. Like they got like Pierce Suter, Teddy Bluger, Ian Cole was brought in last season, like on the defense. Like it was a more balanced lineup than what we've seen in the past, and it ended up working out for them. So that's why this year I'm really curious. I think the Canucks to some degree are a bit better, maybe not better than the team they had in the playoffs last year with Lindholm and Zadorov, but I think they're still a pretty well balanced lineup with the additions like Kiefer Sherwood. I think Danton Heinen's going to be a really good addition for the Canucks this year. He's a local guy from Langley, so I think that he's going to really thrive in this environment. And they finally got a winger for Elias Pettersson and Jake DeBrusk, so hopefully that works out and Pettersson can get going, because otherwise, fans are. I mean, we have PTSD from that Louis Eriksson contract from years ago, right? It just never worked out. He was supposed to be the solution to playing with the Sedins, and it was just one of the worst contracts ever. You hope Pettersson's not in that category, but we'll see. Obviously, he's got to fix some stuff too. Joe also saying the right wingers have to be the worst in the league, talking about Columbus. Again, I'm assuming that Troy's going to disagree with this, but I'm looking at the right wingers. I mean, we talked about some of them. They're pretty good.
Well, okay.
Let's bring it up. Yeah, let's bring it up here.
I'm saying this under the assumption that Boone Jenner is going to be playing at right wing on Adam Fantilli's wing, because he was a right winger before he was forced to play center because our lack of center depth. Yeah. So Kirill Marchenko, like I said earlier in the show, it's pretty clear how I feel about him. According to Byron Bader and every statistic under the sun, this man is due for a breakout season, either this season or next season. He's 23 years old. It's incoming. It's imminent. We all know it's going to happen. Someone in the chat earlier alluded to Boone Jenner is more or less, he's a unicorn. He's a hitting, shot blocking, shooting leader, right? So if you take that into consideration, that weighs in that he's a very good second line right wing, or even a third line right wing if you need him to do that duty. And then I would say Yegor Chinakhov is going to be playing right wing, not Voronkov. And another player that not a lot of people really know about unless they're dialed into the Columbus Blue Jackets or looking at crazy stats. People forget when this guy was drafted, no one knew who he was, and they did not have a video package for him because it was such an off-the-mark pick. But when you look at this advanced stats on this team, the fastest skater on the team, the hardest shot on the team, and you know how they rank the hardest shot and the fastest burst, 1, 2, 3? He had every single one on 1, 2, and 3. So this guy, obviously people look at the Columbus Blue Jackets to bet against them and make money for their parlays, which is absolutely okay. But you might be falling into a trap if you continue that thinking going into the season, because I'm taking an unbiased approach of breaking down the Metropolitan Division very quickly. Okay. From the top, we'll do from how they finished last year. The New York Rangers.
Yeah, let's bring up the stats, but you can keep talking.
So the New York Rangers last year, this is a team that I've often criticized for their lack of ability to score at 5v5, hence their lack of playoff success when things dry up. The New York Rangers were 18th in shots created at 5-on-5, and the Blue Jackets were 14th. The Blue Jackets are better at generating chances at 5-on-5 than the New York Rangers, hence why they beat them more times than they lost this year. So I don't think it's inconceivable to think that the Blue Jackets could potentially win a season series against the Rangers because they've already done it. And the next thing is Carolina. They lost on Waddell. They had tons of key departures. They emptied their assets to get Jake Gensel, who didn't even come back.
Yeah.
Stephen Nason went to the Devils. Brett Pesce went to the Devils. There are boatloads of players that went to the Devils. And another thing that people don't talk about is this team doesn't have an AHL affiliate. So how on earth are they developing these prospects? Seriously. So, like, what are they loaning these players out to other teams without being totally under their?
I didn't even know that. That's interesting. Okay.
Right. So, I know they sign contracts with them once in a while, but it's just not a consistent thing with the Carolina Hurricanes that they've had an AHL affiliate. So, obviously, that must have some hindrance on the development of their prospects. The New York Islanders, they finished third in the Metropolitan Division last year. I live on Long Island. Most of my friends are Islanders fans. It always sounds like I'm poo-pooing them. They allowed more shots on goal at even strength than the Columbus Blue Jackets last year. The only team that allowed more shots on goal at even strength than the New York Islanders were the San Jose Sharks. This is a team that's held together by their goaltending. Respectfully. Like, Ilya Sorokin's incredible. I saw the Edmonton Oilers in person and Connor McDavid take on the New York Islanders in person, and he put up a 50-save shutout, and my mouth was on the floor. He's an incredible player. But with a team who is a top 5 oldest team in the NHL, the New York Islanders, who's made one acquisition in Anthony Duclair, minimal acquisitions, has one of the worst penalty kills in the entire NHL. There's a lot of factors contributing to thinking that the Islanders may not make the playoffs. Obviously, the consistency, the style, and the heaviness, that it takes a lot. But we can't keep expecting this team to keep doing what they're doing. And that's all bias aside. I'm using as many relevant and logical statistics as I can.
No, you're bringing the facts, man.
The Washington Capitals, they don't want Ovi to go out. They need him to break this record. Sidney Crosby is sitting there in his little cabin saying, how come my general manager is not putting all these players around me? What's going on? Jacob Chikrin, I think he's a fantastic defenseman. John Carlson, slowly on the back nine of his career. He's not washy. He had 57, 56 points last year, similarly to Zach Werenski. And I think the gamble on Pierre-Luc Dubois, I mean, all this guy wanted was first-line minutes. I mean, I obviously am not going to say too many glowing things about him as a Blue Jackets fan, but I mean, when you're getting played on the third line and not the first power play on an LA Kings team, he's truthfully not being put in a good position to succeed. Obviously, that may be because of his attitude problems, among other things, which is why he was deployed there. But I think if you're giving him first line even strength minutes and power play time with Ovechkin, I think he's going to probably have a big bounce back campaign. And I honestly would be shocked if he didn't. The Pittsburgh Penguins, like you alluded, nothing Kyle Dubas has done for this team has impressed me at all. They added I know this is 2 years ago, but they added Erik Karlsson, another offensive defenseman that they absolutely didn't need. They needed more.
Completely agree on that.
30 on defense and needed more reliable guys that were similar to like a Brett Pesce that could just take a boatload of minutes and just do their job blocking shots and hitting people. So I'm very low on Pittsburgh this year. Like you said, I don't understand how people are saying, watch out for Pittsburgh, watch out for Pittsburgh. The refs can't even throw enough calls for them to make the playoffs this year, I think, James. So we all know how those go. The Philadelphia Flyers, they're a total wild card. They overachieved last year, and we've seen time and time again a common theme in the NHL. The overachieving teams tend not to repeat. We'll see where Matvei Michkov slides into this. If he's on a line with Owen Tippett, that could be one of the biggest lines in terms of fantasy hockey and real counting stats in the NHL. They're a total wild card. I love Torts. They're probably just going to miss the playoffs and not make it, but they're always going to be competitive because they have Nick Delorier and a really feisty team with Travis Konechny. New Jersey Devils. I love this team. I have one friend that's a Devils fan. Before last season started, the first thing I said was, it's going to be really tough for you guys next year because you got rid of Severson and Graves because of the 24 minutes a night they logged and just did consistent stuff at even strength. One Dougie Hamilton injury, torn pec out for the year. Siegenthaler breaks his foot. Okay, now you're leaning on 19-year-olds that don't have man strength to play NHL minutes in Nemec and Luke Hughes, and they got absolutely destroyed. And that's just the defensive end. So them adding Brett Pesce, them adding Brendan Dillon, those workhorse-type defensemen that go about their business quietly, block shots, hit people. Stefan Nason, third-line winger that kills penalties on the Carolina Hurricanes. If Nico Hischier stays healthy, we saw at the end of last season, Timo Meier revitalized his season with a coaching change. Jesper Bratt's always fantastic. Jack Hughes, if he's healthy, is one of the best players in the league. So I think the hype around the Devils is warranted, and I would be astonished if they did not win the Metropolitan.
Yeah, they're a lot of interesting things. I'm with you on pretty much all these. And poor Tristan Jari, who I got the jersey in the back, I think I told you this. His parents have a grocery store in the town over from where I live. So part of me hopes he does well, but he has not been consistent. I think they've got some goaltending issues. I forgot I forgot the Capitals got Logan Thompson from Vegas. I'm not a believer in him either. Like, I think he's a good goaltender, but I don't think he's the solution there. I don't know if there's much of a difference between him and Darcy Kemper. So I think that's going to depend. And you're right, Dubois, like, he could be good, but he could not be. I mean, this is a guy who's on his third team, right? So it's, sort of tough to say there. But yeah, very, very good assessment on this. We only got a couple minutes left because I got to hop out of here a little bit early. I got to do an interview, but we'll get to a few more questions from Joe. I disagree with Joe here on the Wild. We'll make a push this year. I think the Wild's the exact same team we saw last year, minus switching coaches. They have John Hines in there now. What do you make of the Wild? Because they're obviously in cap hell with those Parise and Suter buyouts.
I think it's real. Hold on, let me look at this team very quickly because I know where I stand on a certain amount of these players because I've already started digging into the stats like crazy for fantasy hockey. Yeah. So I think honestly, and I think realistically, the San Jose Sharks, the Anaheim Ducks, the Seattle Kraken, Calgary Flames, Chicago Blackhawks, and the St. Louis Blues are most likely not going to make the playoffs. Yep. I think everyone can acknowledge that the lower end of the Western Conference isn't that good. And I, for one, am not a personal believer in Vegas and wouldn't be shocked if they don't make the playoffs. Yep. Just by the nature of how thin these divisions are, I think the Wild could make the playoffs because watching the IIHF championship, Matt Boldy was easily the best player on the team. He really added another level of maturity to his game where he was doing Kucherov-esque things in the right faceoff circle, circling off, waiting, not going right at the net. Very little things, and I was very impressed with his game. And Kirill Kaprizov getting 40-goal seasons left and right since he's entered the league. If those two play on the even strength on the same line, we might see double 100-point players in those two, but it depends what the deployment will be. I don't understand why they don't just load up and go Kaprizov, Eriksson, Ek, Boldy at even strength. I really have no idea why. But on the power play, those guys absolutely cook. And if you're a fantasy hockey guy, Joel Eriksson Ek is a legend in bangers leagues because of his shooting, hitting, and blocking. And everyone knows that Matt Boldy, he's consistently fantastic, and he's got a huge frame. He's 6'3", 6'4", and with this level of maturity that he's added into his game on Team USA over the summer, I wouldn't be shocked if he at least had a point per game season.
Yeah, I agree. Now that you sort of mentioned about those teams kind of missing out, like against St. Louis, even with Broberg and Holloway, like that's not enough, I think, to push them in the playoffs. It's going to be a very interesting season as we have a quick look at the Western Conference here. Again, Nashville's gotten a bit better. The Kings, I don't know if the Kings will make it this year. The Knights were just holding on for dear life. And remember, the Knights lost a lot in the offseason. Marchessault, Chandler Stevenson. There's a few others, I think, that Logan, they lost their goalie, obviously Logan Thompson, but Hill's the starter now. I said this before. I think if I was to look at, the division, I think it's going to be Oilers-Canucks as far as the Western Conference. I mean, Winnipeg lost a few names too, Monahan and Toffoli. We'll see how that looks. But yeah, the West it's going to be interesting this year. But you're right. I think all those teams you mentioned, Kraken might be better, but I think they overpaid on a few guys, and we'll have to see sort of how that unfolds there. I'm going to echo what Joe says. Dude, Troy, you were awesome today, man. Really, really good stuff. Well researched. Definitely got to get you back on here again. We'll, I think throughout the season, I'm going to continue to get guests on here, and we'll talk about different things. And maybe we'll do the show more than once a week. We'll sort of see what the boss man says. But anything you want to plug before we get out of here, and anything else you got coming up that you want to let our listeners know?
No, just I really hope I can come back on the show anytime in the regular season.
Well, I said it publicly, so if it doesn't work out, you got to hold me accountable. But 100%, you're going to be my Blue Jackets guy for sure. Because I told you this before, even in the chat. Like, I like having people that know their teams like inside and out. Because the way you know the Blue Jackets is the way I know the Canucks. Like it's every day I'm looking for articles, trying to find something, and I know you're the exact same way.
Yeah, I love following my team, and I love fantasy hockey. So obviously, if you guys have any fantasy hockey content on the channel or whatnot, I could offer my 2 cents in that. I absolutely love fantasy hockey. I just learned Microsoft Excel. I made a database for Fantasy Premier League, and I'm looking to make one for the NHL next to see what I could do this next season.
There we go. I got a hockey pool that I think you should join this year. I'll talk to you about it in our DMs a little bit later. But this is the Fanatics View Hockey Show. Before we get out of here, just make sure you hit that like button. We do the show every single week, every Wednesday. We'll be back next Wednesday for another edition of the show. For Troy, for myself, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks so much for watching.